Hey, I'm really glad you're here. Take a moment to get comfortable wherever you are. Let your shoulders relax and let the day gently fall away. You don't need to do anything right now. Just listen and let the story unfold at its own pace. Whenever you're ready, we'll begin.
It's the night train of the north, when the snow began to whisper along the rails. The night arrived the way it always did in the far north, quietly, without asking permission. In one moment, the sky still held the last pale breath of twilight, and the next, darkness had settled like a thick wool blanket over the land. Above it all, the night sky stretched wide and patient, deep blue melting into black, dusted with stars that seemed older than time itself. They did not sparkle sharply. They glowed softly, as if careful not to wake anyone below. The moon hung low and round, blurred slightly by thin winter clouds drifting past like slow-moving thoughts. The air was cold, but not cruel. It was the kind of cold that felt clean and calm, the kind that made every sound quieter and every movement more deliberate. Snow covered the ground in long, unbroken fields, smoothing away rough edges, softening the world until everything looked gentler than it had during the day. And cutting through that sleeping land ran a single set of railway tracks. They stretched northward, disappearing into the dark, their steel edges faintly glowing under moonlight. Snow rested between the rails, undisturbed, except for two narrow lines where the weight of passing trains had pressed it down again and again over the years. Tonight, those rails were waiting, far in the distance, so far it could almost be mistaken for imagination. A low, steady hum began to rise. It wasn't loud, it wasn't sudden. It arrived gradually, like a distant memory drifting back into focus. The midnight train was coming. It always came at the same hour, though few people bothered to check their clocks anymore. In the north, time moved differently at night. Minutes stretched, seconds softened, and hours felt less important than the slow breathing of the land itself. As the train approached, its sound blended gently with the winter wind. Snow whispered as it slid across the ground in delicate sheets, brushing against frozen grass and wooden fence posts. And tall pine trees stood shoulder to shoulder along the track, their branches heavy with snow, bowing slightly as if in quiet respect. The train did not rush. It never did. Its engine glided forward with practiced patience, wheels turning smoothly, creating a steady rhythm, click-clack, click-clack, that echoed faintly through the stillness. The sound felt comforting, familiar, like a heartbeat heard through a pillow. Soft yellow lights glowed from the windows of the passenger cars, each one a small rectangle of warmth drifting through the cold night. Inside those lights lived silence, calm, and stories that did not need to be told aloud. The train slowed as it approached a tiny northern station, one that existed more for memory than necessity. The platform was narrow and dusted with fresh snow, its edges blurred. A single lamppost stood nearby, its light dim and amber, casting a gentle halo onto the ground. No one hurried. The door opened with a quiet sigh, releasing a breath of warm air into the cold. It fogged briefly, then vanished. A few passengers stepped down slowly, their boots making soft impressions in the snow. They didn't speak. They never did. Words felt too heavy for a night like this. Some carried small bags. Others carried nothing at all. Inside the train, the air was warm and smelled faintly of clean fabric, old wood, and something comforting, like tea that had been poured hours ago and forgotten, still warm enough to soothe. Seats were wide and cushioned, upholstered in deep blue fabric patterned with tiny silver threads that caught the light like stars. Overhead racks held coats, scarves, and hats, all damp with melted snow, quietly steaming. Most passengers were already asleep. A woman by the window rested her head against the glass, her breath fogging it in slow, steady waves. An elderly man across the aisle sat upright, eyes closed, hands folded gently in his lap as if he were listening to the rhythm of the rails in his dreams. A child curled beneath a thick blanket, thumb tucked under their chin, chest rising and falling in perfect calm. The train moved on. Outside, the landscape unfolded like a slow, silent film. Frozen lakes reflected the moon in fractured pieces. Snow-covered hills rolled gently into the distance. Occasionally, a lone cabin appeared, light glowing faintly from a single window, before slipping back into darkness. The night sky seemed closer here, heavier, as if pressing down just enough to remind the world to stay quiet. Above the train, clouds drifted lazily, thin and stretched, allowing stars to peek through. Orion's belt shimmered faintly. The North Star held its place, steady and watchful, guiding travelers without ever moving itself. Inside one of the middle cars, a man sat awake. He wasn't restless. He wasn't worried. He was simply listening. His coat was folded neatly beside him, his scarf draped over the armrest. He held a warm mug between his hands, not drinking, just enjoying the heat seeping into his palms. His eyes followed the slow passing of trees outside, each one briefly illuminated before slipping away. This was his favorite part of the journey, not the destination, not the arrival, but this stretch of midnight when the world felt paused and the train felt like the only moving thing in existence. The snow began to fall again. At first, just a few flakes, large, soft, drifting downward without urgency. They caught the light from the train's windows, glowing briefly before settling gently onto the ground. Soon, more followed, filling the air in quiet abundance. Snowfall always changed the sound of the world. The rails grew quieter. The wind softened. Even the engine seemed to lower its voice. The train continued north, cutting a warm path through the cold, its lights reflecting off the snow like distant stars that had chosen to travel instead of stay still. Somewhere between stations, between names and places, the train entered a stretch of land known only to those who traveled at night. There were no signs here, no markers, just long silence and endless white. Passengers slept deeper. Dreams grew slower. As the man with the mug finally closed his eyes, leaning back, letting the gentle rocking of the car carry him. The rhythm of the rails wrapped around his thoughts, smoothing them, quieting them. Outside, the snow whispered along the tracks. It whispered of old journeys and gentle endings. Of nights that asked nothing more than rest. Of trains that moved not to hurry people forward, but to give them time to drift. The midnight train of the north moved on, steady, warm, and unbothered by the cold, carrying its sleeping passengers through the long, silent heart of winter. Yen the night, pleased by its presence, held still, a soft lantern glow in the sleepless north. As the midnight train continued its gentle passage north, the world outside seemed to grow even quieter, as though the land itself had decided to listen. The snowfall thinned, becoming a fine, drifting mist of white that moved lazily through the air. Each flake descended without hurry, spinning softly, settling wherever it pleased. Snow gathered along the edges of the tracks, rounding them, blurring their sharpness, turning steel and stone into something almost tender. As the train's lantern light, mounted at the front, cast a warm, amber glow that reached just far enough to touch the darkness, but never tried to chase it away. It illuminated the rails ahead, the gentle curve of the track, and the quiet snow beyond. Everything outside that glow remained calm and unknowable, resting comfortably in shadow. Inside the train, the lamps were dimmed further. The soft lighting created pockets of warmth along the aisles, small islands of comfort drifting through the cold northern night. The shadows stretched and swayed gently with the movement of the cars, never sharp, never startling, just slow, familiar shapes rocking back and forth. The conductor moved quietly through the cars. His footsteps were careful, measured, almost silent against the carpeted floor. He had worked this route for many years, long enough to know that midnight trains required a different kind of attention. No loud announcements, no unnecessary movements, just presence. He paused now and then, glancing down the aisle, checking that blankets were tucked in, that luggage rested safely overhead, that no one looked restless or lost. When his lantern passed over sleeping faces, he smiled faintly, not a smile of excitement, but one of gentle satisfaction. Everyone was exactly where they needed to be. In one corner of the car, a woman sat awake with a book resting closed on her lap. She hadn't turned a page in quite some time. Her fingers traced the edge of the cover slowly, absent-mindedly, as she gazed out the window. Outside, the night sky had deepened to its fullest shade of dark blue, almost black. Stars felt closer now, larger somehow, as if the thin northern air allowed them to lean in. They scattered across the sky in quiet abundance, forming patterns that felt familiar even if their names were long forgotten. The moon drifted behind a veil of thin cloud, its light softened and diffused, spilling gently over the snowfields. The land reflected it back faintly, creating a glow so subtle it felt imagined. The woman exhaled slowly. Her breath fogged the glass, blooming outward, then fading. With each breath, her shoulders relaxed a little more. The train's motion lulled her thoughts, smoothing them into long, unbroken lines. She didn't need to read. She didn't need to think. She was simply traveling. Farther down the train, a young couple slept side by side, hands loosely intertwined. Their coats were folded neatly at their feet, scarves draped over the seat backs. Their heads leaned toward each other, foreheads nearly touching, moving slightly with the rhythm of the rails. Every so often, the train crossed a bridge. These bridges were old and sturdy, built decades ago when winters were harsher and trains were heavier. As the wheels rolled over them, the sound changed briefly, deepening, echoing softly through the metal structure, before returning to the familiar click and clack. The sound was never jarring. It was like turning over in bed, just enough movement to remind you that you were still there, still safe, still wrapped in warmth. Beyond the bridge, a frozen river stretched wide and pale beneath the moonlight. Snow rested atop its surface, hiding the slow-moving water beneath. Along its banks, bare trees stood like quiet sentinels, their branches etched against the sky. Somewhere out there, an owl called once, low and distant, then fell silent again. The sound drifted through the cold air, brushed the side of the train, and disappeared. Inside, the man with the mug stirred slightly in his seat. His eyes opened just enough to take in the dim glow of the lamps, the gentle sway of the car. He adjusted the blanket over his legs, setting the mug carefully into the holder beside him. The tea had cooled now, but the warmth lingered. He didn't mind. He leaned his head back and listened. The train made its way through a stretch of forest, where tall pines grew close together, their branches forming a natural corridor. Snow slipped from the needles in slow, quiet cascades as the train passed, falling soundlessly to the ground below. Lantern light flickered briefly across the trunks, then moved on, leaving the forest undisturbed once more. This part of the north never slept, not truly, but it rested deeply. Animals moved less. Winds softened. Even the stars seemed to blink more slowly. The train was part of that rhythm. It did not interrupt the night. It belonged to it. In the dining car, now closed for the evening, a single lamp remained lit above a small table near the window. The thermos sat there, still warm, next to two empty cups. A plate held the last crumbs of bread from earlier, forgotten but content. The scent of coffee lingered faintly in the air, mingling with clean linen and winter coats. It was a smell that spoke of earlier conversations, of quiet laughter, of warmth shared and then gently set aside. Time moved differently here. Minutes did not matter. Schedules faded. Only the journey remained. As the train rolled onward, snow began to fall more steadily again, thickening the darkness beyond the windows. Flakes pressed softly against the glass, then slid away, leaving thin trails that caught the light for a moment before vanishing. Passengers slipped deeper into sleep. Dreams unfolded slowly, of warm rooms, of distant places, of long walks under quiet skies. No sharp edges, no urgency, just drifting thoughts carried gently forward. The conductor paused once more at the end of the car, resting his hand lightly on a seat back. He gazed out the window for a long moment, watching the lantern glow fade into the falling snow. This was his favorite hour, not because it was lonely, but because it was peaceful. The train moved on through the sleepless north, its soft light stitching warmth into the cold, its steady motion rocking the night itself toward rest. And somewhere beneath the blankets, behind closed eyes, every passenger felt it, that subtle assurance that for now, there was nowhere else they needed to be. Passengers who spoke only in quiet dreams. By the time the midnight train reached the deeper stretches of the north, conversation had completely disappeared, not because it was forbidden, but because it was no longer needed. Words belonged to the day. Night had its own language. Inside the cars, sleep had settled gently over the passengers, moving from seat to seat like a soft tide. It arrived without effort, without struggle. Eyes closed, breathing evened out, bodies relaxed into the rhythm of the rails. The train rocked slightly as it followed a long curve in the track, the motion slow and reassuring, like a cradle guided by invisible hands. Dreams began to bloom. They were not vivid or sharp. They did not rush or demand attention. Instead, they unfolded the way winter landscapes did, gradually, quietly, with long stretches of calm between moments of meaning. The woman with the unopened book now dreamed of a warm kitchen filled with early morning light. A kettle steamed gently on the stove. Snow rested on the windowsill outside, unmoving. She didn't hurry toward anything. She simply stood there, hands wrapped around a mug, watching the day arrive at its own pace. Across the aisle, the elderly man dreamed of a long train platform from years ago. He was younger there, his steps lighter, his coat thinner. Someone waved to him from a distance, smiling. He waved back, unafraid of the distance between them. The child beneath the blanket dreamed of snow falling upward into the sky, each flake returning gently to the stars. The sky laughed quietly, pleased to receive them back. The man who had been listening earlier now slept fully, his breath matching the steady tempo of the train. His dream held no images, only motion, a sense of being carried, a quiet trust in the journey itself. Outside, the night listened. The snow-covered forest thinned, opening into wide plains where the wind moved freely, brushing the surface of the snow in long, smooth strokes. Moonlight spread evenly across the land, turning everything silver blue, calm, and endless. The train crossed another bridge, longer this time, arching over a frozen valley. Below, darkness pooled quietly, undisturbed by the passing of steel and light above it. The echo of the wheels lingered for a few moments, then faded back into silence. Inside the car, a woman shifted slightly in her sleep. Her scarf slipped from her shoulder. Without waking, she pulled it closer, instinctively, as though the night itself had tucked her in. The conductor passed through again, slower now, his lantern dimmed to its lowest glow. He moved like part of the train, expected, unobtrusive, steady. When he reached the end of the car, he paused and looked down the aisle one last time. Every seat held stillness. He nodded once, quietly satisfied, and moved on. Beyond the windows, the sky seemed even larger now. The stars thinned in some places and gathered in others, forming gentle patterns that shifted as clouds drifted through. The moon slipped free again, brighter now, casting long shadows across the snowfields. Somewhere far off, a lone farmhouse stood with its lights turned low. Smoke rose faintly from its chimney, barely visible against the dark. Inside, someone slept near a warm stove, unaware of the train gliding past miles away. The world felt connected by small, invisible threads. As the train continued north, the cold deepened, but inside, warmth remained constant. The heater hummed softly, blankets held their weight, and the air stayed still and calm. Sleep grew heavier, deeper. Dreams softened further, losing their edges, blending gently into one another. Thoughts slowed until they felt like drifting snowflakes, distinct for a moment, then dissolving into the whole. The train did not hurry through this part of the night. It knew better. Each mile passed quietly, respectfully, allowing the sleepers to rest without interruption. Even the engine seemed to breathe more slowly, its power steady and restrained. Above, the night sky held everything in place. Stars watched. Clouds drifted. The moon followed along, and the midnight train of the north carried its passengers through the silent heart of winter, where words were unnecessary and rest came as naturally as snowfall. The long pause between two frozen stations. Somewhere far north, beyond names that appeared on maps, beyond places that mattered to daylight, the midnight train began to slow. Not suddenly, not noticeably at first. It was the kind of slowing that only the sleeping world could feel, a gentler pull, a longer space between the click and the clack of the rails. The rhythm stretched, softened, as though the train itself had decided to breathe more deeply. Outside, the land opened wide. Snow-covered plains spread out in every direction, smooth and untouched, reflecting the pale glow of the moon like a quiet sea made of frost. No fences interrupted the view. No roads crossed the tracks. Just white, silver, and shadow layered softly upon one another. The sky above felt impossibly large. Stars hung motionless, distant and patient, their light traveling for ages just to reach this moment. Thin clouds drifted slowly across them, never fully hiding them, only dimming them briefly, like a gentle hand passing over tired eyes. The train eased onward, approaching a place that was not quite a station and not quite nothing at all. There were no signs announcing it, no lights welcoming arrivals, only a short platform half buried in snow, barely visible beneath the moonlight. This was one of those northern pauses, built long ago for reasons that no longer mattered, used now only by the night. The train slowed further, then stopped. The engine exhaled softly, releasing a low, steady sigh that drifted into the cold air and disappeared. Snow continued to fall, light and fine, settling quietly against the cars, the rails, the platform. Inside, no one stirred. Sleep held firm. The heaters hummed gently, unchanged. Lamps glowed dimly. Blankets rose and fell with steady breathing. The pause did not feel like interruption. It felt intentional, as though the journey had planned this moment of stillness all along. The conductor stood near the door, lantern lowered. He did not open it. He never did at this place. Instead, he rested his hand lightly against the wall of the car and waited. His breath formed small clouds in the cooler air near the door, then faded. He gazed out the window at the empty platform, at the snow gathering slowly along its edge. This stop was not for passengers. It was for the train, for the land, for the night itself. Outside, silence deepened, the kind of silence that did not feel empty, but full. Full of snow settling, of distant winds moving far across the plains, of the quiet weight of winter pressing gently downward. Even the stars seemed to pause. Inside one of the sleeping cars, the woman with the book shifted deeper into her dream. Her kitchen faded, replaced by a wide field beneath a soft sky. She walked slowly through tall grass dusted with frost, each step soundless, unhurried. The elderly man dreamed of sitting on a bench beside a frozen lake. The surface was smooth and white, stretching endlessly. He was not cold. He was wrapped in a thick coat, warmed by something unseen. The child dreamed of floating, not falling, not flying, just drifting gently above a snowy forest, watching treetops pass beneath them like dark waves. The man with the mug dreamed of nothing at all, just warmth, just motion remembered, just rest. The pause lingered. Seconds stretched into something softer. Time loosened its structure, no longer measured by clocks or schedules. Here, between frozen stations, time existed only as stillness. Snow gathered quietly along the train's steps, clinging lightly to metal edges. Ice crystals formed delicate patterns on the windows, tracing lines that caught the lamplight inside like faint constellations. The night wrapped itself closer around the train, not to trap it, but to hold it. Far in the distance, a faint wind moved across the plains, brushing snow into long, gentle curves. It did not howl. It whispered, low and patient, carrying stories too old to remember clearly. Stories of other trains, other nights, other travelers drifting through the dark. The conductor checked his pocket watch, not because he needed to, but out of habit. The hands moved slowly, unbothered by the pause. He nodded once, satisfied, and slipped the watch away. Still, he waited. The pause was not finished yet. Inside the train, the air felt thicker somehow, more insulated, more secure. Sleep deepened further, settling into bones and muscles, quieting even the smallest tensions. Breathing synchronized. The train felt like a single living thing now, inhaling and exhaling gently, held in place by snow and silence. Outside, the moon drifted higher, its light sharpening just slightly as clouds thinned. Shadows stretched longer across the platform, soft-edged and slow-moving. Nothing else moved, and that was enough. At last, so gradually it could hardly be noticed, the train prepared to continue. The engine stirred, not roaring, not announcing itself, just a subtle shift, a quiet readiness. The faintest vibration ran along the cars like a sleeper turning over beneath a blanket. Snow slid from the sides of the train in soft cascades, falling soundlessly to the ground. Inside, a few passengers stirred, not waking, not dreaming more deeply, just adjusting to the return of motion. A hand tightened briefly around a blanket. A head shifted against a window. Breathing remained slow and even. The conductor lifted his lantern slightly, its glow warm and reassuring. He did not speak. There was no need. The train moved forward again, slowly at first, gently. The wheels found the rails once more, the familiar rhythm returning, softer than before, click, clack, like a lullaby remembered from long ago. The pause slipped behind them, settling back into the snow as if it had never been there at all. The platform faded into darkness. As the planes rolled on, the night resumed its quiet watch, and the midnight train of the north continued onward, unhurried, unburdened, carrying its sleeping passengers through the cold, wrapped in warmth, held by motion, drifting ever closer to the place where night finally loosens its hold. Where the night train slowed and rested, the midnight train of the north continued forward, steady and unhurried, as though it understood something few travelers ever did, that endings should never arrive abruptly. Outside, the sky had begun to change, almost imperceptibly. The deep black of night softened at its edges, thinning into dark blue, then into a gentler shade that hinted at what would come much later. Dawn was still far away, but the night had begun its slow retreat. Stars faded one by one, not vanishing, but dimming politely, as if stepping back to make room. The moon slipped lower toward the horizon, its light stretching across the snowfields in long, quiet paths that shimmered faintly before dissolving. The cold remained, but it no longer felt sharp. It felt settled. The train moved through a valley now, where hills rose gently on either side, their slopes smooth with snow. Tall pines stood scattered along the ridges, their dark shapes softened by frost. Between them, shadows pooled quietly, undisturbed. The rails curved slowly, guiding the train like a hand placed lightly on a shoulder. Inside the cars, sleep held steady, but it had shifted. Dreams grew lighter, less defined. Passengers floated closer to waking without quite arriving there, suspended in that gentle space between rest and awareness. The woman with the book stirred first. Her dream faded like mist under pale light. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking once, then again. For a moment, she wasn't sure where she was. The dim lamps, the gentle sway, the hush of the car, all of it felt familiar and comforting. She smiled faintly and did not move. There was no need. Across the aisle, the elderly man breathed deeply, then exhaled with a quiet sigh. His hands unfolded in his lap. He did not wake, but something inside him settled, as though a long-held thought had finally been set down. The child beneath the blanket shifted, curling tighter, chasing the last fragments of a dream where snowflakes returned to the sky. Their breathing remained slow and even, lips parted slightly, at peace. The man with the mug opened his eyes and gazed toward the window. Outside, the snowfields glowed softly now, not bright, not awake, just gently visible. He felt no urge to check the time. Whatever hour it was felt exactly right. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes again, just a little longer. The conductor made his final walk through the train. His steps were quiet, familiar, measured by years of repetition. He paused at the end of each car, glancing down the rows of seats. Blankets still covered shoulders. Coats remained neatly folded. Bags rested undisturbed. Everyone was calm. Satisfied, he returned to his small compartment and extinguished his lantern, leaving only the soft overhead lamps to glow. The train slowed slightly, not stopping, not pausing, but easing, as though preparing to rest even while moving. This was the final stretch of night. Beyond the valley, the land opened again into wide plains. The snow here looked untouched, endless, stretching toward the horizon where sky and earth blended seamlessly together. Wind moved across the surface in long, smooth lines, brushing patterns into the snow that disappeared as quickly as they formed. Above, clouds thinned further, allowing pale starlight to filter through. The sky felt higher now, lighter, less weighted. The train passed a small cluster of buildings, a town barely awake. A few windows glowed faintly. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin, straight lines. A street lamp flickered near a corner store, its light reflecting off icy pavement. The train did not sound its horn. It glided past respectfully, as if not to disturb the early sleepers still tucked away inside. Inside the cars, warmth remained constant. The hum of the heater blended with the soft roll of the wheels, creating a sound so steady it barely registered, a presence rather than a noise. Time resumed its gentle flow. Minutes regained their shape, though they still moved slowly. The night had not released its hold completely, and the train honored that, maintaining its quiet pace. The woman with the book finally lifted it again, opening to the page where she had stopped hours earlier. She read one sentence, then another, then closed it once more, content to simply hold it. The elderly man shifted and opened his eyes briefly, gazing at the ceiling before closing them again, reassured. The child sighed softly and turned onto their side, blanket tucked beneath their chin. The man with the mug stretched his fingers, feeling warmth return to them, and allowed a small smile to form. He had arrived at nothing in particular, and it felt perfect. Outside, the first suggestion of dawn brushed the far edge of the sky, not light, not color, just a soft thinning of darkness. The night exhaled. The midnight train of the north continued forward, carrying its passengers gently toward morning, but without hurry, without insistence. It had done what it came to do. It had carried rest through the cold. It had stitched warmth into winter. It had moved through silence without breaking it. As the train rolled on, the night settled back into the snowfields, content and complete, knowing it had held its travelers safely through its deepest hours. And somewhere between sleep and waking, every passenger felt it, that quiet certainty that for this night, at least, everything was exactly as it should be. The train moved on, the sky softened, and rest lingered unbroken.
There's nothing else you need to listen for now. Just let your breathing stay slow and easy. If you're still awake, that's okay. And if you're drifting off, let yourself go gently. I'll be right here next time. Rest well and good night.